All right, so welcome to another deep dive with the All Sorts podcast.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be looking at the disappearance of the Roanoke colony.
The Lost Colony, right.
Yeah, so this is England's first attempt at a permanent North American settlement.
Yeah.
And it vanished between 1585 and 1590.
Poof.
And we're going to try to figure out what happened.
Yeah, we've got some pretty cool stuff to look at. We're going to go through historical accounts, archaeological findings, scientific research, really trying to understand what exactly happened to you.
Yeah, what happened to these people.
Right.
So if you are the type of person who enjoys uncovering stories, who loves the thrill of the hunt for knowledge, then come along with the All Sorts podcast on YouTube. Liking the video really helps other people find the show.
Yes.
And sharing this deep dive with your friends and family helps spread the word.
Yeah.
Subscribe so you don't miss any new deep dives, and know that our archives are filled with past deep dives waiting to ignite your intellect.
Absolutely.
We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Threads under All Sorts Podcast.
Yes.
Okay, let's start by setting the scene. We're talking about the late 16th century, and England, under the rule of Queen Elizabeth I, is looking to expand its reach. What were the motivations behind this push for colonization? Why North America?
Well, it's important to remember that this is a time of intense rivalry between European powers, particularly England and Spain. Spain, of course, had already established a strong presence in the Americas, and England was keen to challenge that dominance. North America, with its vast unexplored territories and potential for resources, presented a prime opportunity for England to establish itself as a major player on the global stage.
So it was about more than just finding new land. It was about power, resources, and challenging Spain's control of the New World. It was a big move.
It was a huge move, fraught with risks and uncertainties.
So, Sir Walter Raleigh, a prominent explorer and courtier, steps onto this stage. He secures the Queen's blessing to establish a colony. He's got the ambition, he's got the royal backing, but how does he make it happen? What are the first steps?
Well, first, you need information. Raleigh knew very little about this new land.
Right.
So he commissions a reconnaissance mission in 1584, led by Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow. Their job: explore the coastline, assess potential sites for settlement, and most importantly, gather intelligence on the native inhabitants.
Okay, so that's like the scouting party. They set sail, they land on the outer banks of present-day North Carolina in July of 1584. And what do they find? What does Roanoke Island look like to these early explorers?
They're met with what appears to be a paradise. Think lush vegetation, abundant wildlife, fertile soil. Barlow, in his account, even describes the air as being perfumed with sweet smells.
Wow.
They encounter the native Algonquian people, specifically the Secotun tribe, and initially these interactions seem to be positive, marked by trade and a degree of mutual curiosity.
It sounds like everything's pointing towards this being the ideal spot for a colony.
It does, right? And that's what they report back to Raleigh and the Queen. To further strengthen the relationship and gather more information, Manleo from Croatoan Island, Wanches from the Secotun.
Okay, so they return to England with glowing reports, exotic goods, and 2 Native Americans who can provide even more insights into this new land. This must have caused quite a stir.
It was a sensation. Queen Elizabeth was so impressed she knighted Raleigh and even bestowed the name Virginia on the territory in honor of her status as the Virgin Queen. Raleigh now had the momentum, the royal backing, and a name for his new world venture.
And the race was on to establish that permanent English presence. Now, the next chapter is where things start to get a little less idyllic, right? This 1585 expedition, it's not just about exploration anymore. It's a much larger undertaking with a different set of goals.
Exactly. It's a much more ambitious and, frankly, more militaristic expedition. It's about establishing control, not just observing. They sent about 600 men, led by Ralph Lane, who was appointed governor, and Sir Richard Grenville as the fleet commander.
600. That's a significant increase from the initial exploration.
Oh, absolutely. And remember, among these men are figures like John White, the artist whose watercolor paintings would provide invaluable visual records of the native people and the landscape, Thomas Harriot, a scientist tasked with documenting the flora and fauna, and even Joachim Gans, a metallurgist who was likely there to assess the potential for mineral resources. And of course, Manteo and Wanches return as well, serving as, I suppose you could say, guides and interpreters.
So a much larger group, a more diverse set of skills, and a definite shift in focus towards establishing a permanent and fortified presence. But this voyage, Even getting there was fraught with problems, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They were hit by storms, forced to make repairs in Puerto Rico. That caused some friction between Lane and Grenville. And then, just as they approach their destination, disaster strikes.
What happens?
Their flagship, the Tiger, runs aground at Wokokan.
Oh, no.
A lot of their vital food supplies are lost. The ship's damaged.
So they've barely arrived, and they're already facing a major setback.
Yes, and this really highlights the inherent fragility of these early colonial ventures, right? These ships, they were at the mercy of the elements. They were reliant on the winds and the tides. And any unforeseen event, like a storm or a shipwreck, could completely derail the entire enterprise.
Yeah, you're in a new land, you're completely dependent on what you brought with you, and now a significant portion of that is gone.
Yeah.
What impact does this have on the colonists and their interactions with the Native Americans?
It puts them in a vulnerable position from the start. Remember, they planned for only about 100 men to stay. They needed the supplies from the Tiger to sustain a larger group. Now, they're forced to rely more heavily on the natives for food and assistance, which creates a dynamic of dependence, and as we'll see, this dependence leads to tension and ultimately conflict.
So it's not just about establishing a fort, it's about survival at this point.
Absolutely.
Okay, so despite this initial setback, Grenville does lead some explorations, right?
He does. He explores the Pamlico Sound, makes contact with various Croatoan villages, and this gives White and Harriet the opportunity to really observe and document Native American life and culture.
This is where we get those amazing watercolors from White, those detailed descriptions of Algonquian society from Harriet. It's a brief period of relative calm and discovery.
Yes, but it doesn't last. A seemingly insignificant incident quickly escalates and throws everything into turmoil. A silver cup goes missing.
Oh.
A silver cup. The English accuse the Aquescagak of stealing it.
Okay.
They demand its return, and when it's not produced, they retaliate by burning down the entire village.
That escalated quickly.
Yes, it did. And this really sets the tone for future interactions. It establishes a pattern of mistrust and disproportionate responses from the English.
So any goodwill that had been built up, any trust that had been established, it's all gone in an instant.
Pretty much. It's a huge turning point.
And this is even before the fort is established.
Right. After the incident with the Aquescagak, Lane sets up his fort on the north side of Roanoke Island.
Okay, and why there? What made Roanoke Island a good choice for a fort?
Well, strategically, Roanoke Island had a lot to offer. It provided access to the ocean, which was crucial for supplies and communication with England, but it also offered some degree of protection from the open sea.
Okay, I see. So it's kind of a sheltered harbor.
Exactly. And its position within the network of sounds and inlets made it easier to defend against potential attacks, particularly from the Spanish, who the English were constantly wary of.
So they build their fort, they're trying to establish themselves, but things aren't going well with the Secatan, are they?
Not at all. The English are becoming more reliant on them for food, which is causing tension.
And then Granganameo, who had been an advocate for peaceful relations with the English, he dies, right?
Yes.
What happens after that?
Well, Wingina, the Secatan leader, changes his name to Pamisopam,
Pamisopan.
which translates to one who watches.
Okay, interesting.
And this signals a shift in policy.
Like he's not trusting anymore.
Exactly. He's no longer actively promoting cooperation. He's watching, he's waiting, he's assessing the threat these colonists pose.
So what's Lane doing in the midst of all this? He's not just sitting in the fort, is he?
He's not. He actually comes up with a plan to relocate the colony to Chesapeake Bay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He believes it's a better location, more fertile land, better harbors.
Like sense. But this plan depends on supplies arriving from England, right?
It does, and those supplies are delayed significantly.
Oh, no. And while he's waiting, Lane decides to lead an expedition up the Roanoke River.
Yes, he's searching for a place called Chonas Tematan. It's described in some native accounts as a land rich in resources, maybe even with access to copper mines.
Sounds promising. So how does this expedition go?
It's a disaster. They face hostility from the native tribes, they find deserted villages, they're ambushed. Pamisopan had clearly warned the inland tribes about the English, and they weren't welcomed.
So they return to Roanoke empty-handed, and probably in worse shape than when they left.
Yes, they're starving, they're demoralized, and the situation at Roanoke isn't any better. Rumors of their demise had spread, and Pamisopan had begun to take action. He was preparing to withdraw his people from Roanoke Island, effectively cutting off the English from their main source of food.
This sounds incredibly dire for the colonists. They're running out of food, they're surrounded by increasingly hostile natives, and there's no sign of help from England. What happens next?
It's a moment of true desperation, but then just when all hope seems lost, a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate intervenes.
That happens.
Sir Francis Drake, the legendary English privateer, arrives off the coast of Roanoke with his fleet.
Wow, talk about a timely arrival. What brings Drake to Roanoke?
Well, he'd been raiding Spanish settlements in the Caribbean, and Roanoke was a convenient stopping point on his return voyage to England.
I see. So what does Lane do? Does he see this as a chance to get resupplied, to regroup?
He sees it as an opportunity to escape. He recognizes that the colony is failing, and he persuades his men to evacuate with Drake.
So they abandon the fort, they leave Roanoke Island. Is everyone on board with this decision?
Well, not everyone. The historical record indicates that 3 colonists chose to stay behind for reasons unknown.
3 people decided to stay.
It's a mystery, and unfortunately, their fate remains unknown.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first attempt at a permanent English settlement in North America ends in, well, failure.
It does.
The colonists return to England with Drake. They bring with them tobacco, maize, potatoes. These new crops will have a huge impact on English agriculture. But the dream of a colony at Roanoke, that's gone.
For now.
Right, because, incredibly, Raleigh doesn't give up.
He doesn't. He's persuaded by people like Richard Hackley, Thomas Harriot, John White, who still believe in the potential of Virginia.
They're convinced that a permanent English settlement in the New World is achievable.
Absolutely. They argue that the previous failures were due to circumstance, poor leadership, maybe even bad luck. They believe that with the right approach, with the right people, a colony can succeed.
So Raleigh, he's determined to try again. He decides to send a new expedition, this time under the leadership of John White, who had been part of the 1585 expedition. But this time, they're not going back to Roanoke Island, are they?
No, Roanoke Island is considered too dangerous, too problematic. They've seen the hostility of the native tribes. They know the harbor is unsuitable for larger ships. The new target is Chesapeake Bay.
Makes sense. So tell me about this new expedition. What's different this time? Who are the colonists?
Well, this time it's not just about soldiers and explorers. This is about families, about creating a permanent settlement, a true English community in the New World. There are about 115 colonists, men, women, children. Among them are John White's own daughter, Eleanor, and her husband, Ananias Dare.
And this is significant because Eleanor is pregnant, right?
Yes. She gives birth, shortly after their arrival, to a daughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World.
Virginia Dare, a name that would become synonymous with the mystery of the Lost Colony. So they set sail in 1587, families on board, hopes and dreams of a new life, headed for Chesapeake Bay. But things don't go according to plan, do they?
No, they don't. Their pilot, Simon Fernandez, for reasons that are still debated, refuses to take them further north. He insists on landing at Roanoke Island.
Roanoke Island. But they specifically chose Chesapeake Bay to avoid Roanoke.
I know, it's a baffling decision. Some historians speculate that Fernandez was in league with some of the privateers, who were more interested in raiding Spanish ships than establishing colonies. Others believe he may have simply been incompetent or afraid to navigate the unfamiliar waters of Chesapeake Bay. Whatever the reason, the colonists are forced to disembark at Roanoke, against their wishes and against the better judgment of John White.
What a setback. So they find themselves back on Roanoke Island, a place where they explicitly did not want to be. What do they find when they arrive?
Well, the site of the abandoned fort is a chilling sight. The houses are overgrown. There's no sign of Grenville's men, except for a few scattered human bones.
Oh, no.
It's an unsettling welcome, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in this new land.
So they're back on Roanoke, a place they don't want to be, facing the same challenges that defeated the previous colonies, and now they're dealing with the added responsibility of families, of children.
And the situation deteriorates rapidly. Shortly after their arrival, one of the colonists, George Howe, is killed by a native while he's out crabbing. They're immediately reminded of the ever-present threat of violence.
And this is just days after Virginia Dare is born. It's hard to imagine a more precarious start for this new community.
Absolutely. They're low on supplies, their relations with the natives are strained, and they're in a location they never intended to be. The situation is dire, and they know they need help from England.
And this is where John White makes a fateful decision.
He does. He agrees to return to England to plead for more supplies, more colonists, basically anything that can help them survive.
He leaves his daughter, his newborn granddaughter, and the rest of the colonists behind. It's a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life.
Before he leaves, they make a pact. If they're forced to move from Roanoke, they'll carve the name of their new location into a tree. A simple message, but a vital clue for White when he returns.
And when does he return?
3 years later. 3 agonizing years.
3 years. What causes the delay?
The outbreak of the Anglo-Spanish War.
Oh, right, of course. The Spanish Armada.
Exactly. England is on the brink of invasion, and Queen Elizabeth forbids any ships from leaving. White is trapped. He's desperate to return to Roanoke, but he's powerless to do anything.
So for 3 years, there's no contact between the colony and England.
There's one attempt at a relief mission in 1588. 2 small ships, the Brave and the Roe, are sent, but they're attacked and looted by French privateers, and they have to return to England.
And White, he's just waiting, hoping, praying that his family, that the colonists are still alive.
He is. And in 1590, he finally gets his chance to return. He manages to secure passage on a privateering expedition headed for the Caribbean.
Okay, so this isn't a dedicated relief mission. It's a privateering voyage that happens to be going in the right direction.
Exactly. It's a chance, and White takes it.
And this brings us to that fateful day in August of 1590, when White finally arrives back at Roanoke. What happens? What does he find?
The Hopewell arrives off the coast of Croatoan Island on August 12th.
Croatoan Island, that's where Manteo is from, right?
It is, yes.
Do they make contact with the Croatan people?
The historical record doesn't say. But a few days later, on August 15th, they spot smoke rising from Roanoke Island.
Smoke. That must have given them hope.
It does, but reaching the island is difficult. They lose some men in a boating accident. It's not until August 17th that White finally sets foot back on Roanoke.
And what does he find?
The settlement is deserted. The houses have been dismantled. Personal belongings are scattered everywhere, and there's no sign of the colonists.
Oh no. Just like with Grenfell's men, it's another ghost settlement.
But this time, there's a clue.
A clue.
Carved into a palisade post, they find the word Croatoan.
Croatoan.
And on a nearby tree, they find C-R-O.
C-R-O.
This is the signal, the message that White had agreed on with the colonists.
They've gone to Croatoan Island. To Manteo's people.
That's what White believes.
So what does he do? Does he go after them?
He tries to. They set sail for Croatoan Island, but they run into a storm, they lose their anchor, and they're forced to turn back.
Forced to turn back, with no idea what happened to his daughter, his granddaughter, any of the colonists.
John White never saw them again.
And the fate of the Roanoke colonists becomes one of history's most enduring mysteries?
Yes.
Okay, so the colonists are gone. What happens next? Does anyone go looking for them?
Well, Raleigh certainly doesn't forget about them. He continues to claim that they might still be alive, but he's also preoccupied with other ventures. He's trying to establish a colony in Guyana. He's facing challenges at home. He's not in a position to mount a full-scale search.
So the official search efforts, they kind of fizzle out.
They do, but the mystery remains. And over the years, various individuals and groups have tried to piece together what happened. When the Jamestown colonists arrive in 1607, they hear stories from the native tribes about the Roanoke colonists, stories of possible massacres, of survivors living among different groups.
Do any of these stories pan out? Is there any evidence to support them?
Not really. They're mostly rumors, whispers passed down through generations. There's even a Spanish map, the Zuniga map, which suggests that some of the colonists were living among a native tribe inland, but nothing concrete.
Okay, so no definitive answers from Jamestown. What about later investigations?
Well, there's one account that's particularly interesting. John Lawson, an explorer who surveyed the Carolina coast in the early 1700s, he encounters a native tribe called the Hatteras.
The Hatteras.
And they claim to have European ancestors. They even have some European features, like gray eyes. Lawson speculates that some of the Roanoke colonists may have intermarried and assimilated with this tribe.
Okay, so this is the assimilation theory. The idea that the colonists didn't die, they were absorbed into the native population.
Exactly. And this theory is further supported by the fact that Lawson found remnants of a fort and European artifacts on Roanoke Island, suggesting that at least some of the colonists may have stayed in the area.
It's an intriguing theory. It kind of offers a less tragic ending to the story.
It does.
Now, obviously, we have the historical records, the accounts of the explorers, the rumors and stories passed down through the native tribes. But what about more modern research? Has science been able to shed any light on this mystery?
It has. In the late 20th century, scientists started using dendrochronology, which is the study of tree rings, to analyze past climate conditions. And they discovered something interesting.
What's that?
They found evidence of a severe drought in the Tidewater region between 1587 and 1589.
Okay, and this is significant
It
because...
coincides with the disappearance of the colony.
Oh, I see. So this drought could have been a major factor in their demise.
Exactly. It could have decimated their crops, made it difficult to find food and water, even led to conflict with the native tribes over scarce resources.
So it's not just about hostile natives, it's about the environment, the climate, playing a role in this mystery.
Yes.
And what about archaeology? Have there been any significant finds?
There have ongoing excavations at a site called Site X, which is located near a native village called Mediquim, have yielded a number of Tudor-era artifacts, things like pottery, tools, even a signet ring,
And this suggests...
that a group of colonists may have relocated to this area, perhaps seeking refuge with the native tribe there.
Interesting. So we have historical accounts, climate data, archaeological evidence. It's like a giant puzzle with all these pieces scattered around. Have historians been able to put together a definitive answer, a single explanation for what happened to the Roanoke colonists?
No. And that's part of what makes the story so fascinating, so captivating. We have all these clues, but the complete picture remains elusive. We have theories, of course, but nothing conclusive.
So let's talk about some of those theories. We've already mentioned the assimilation theory, the idea that they were absorbed into the native population. What are some of the other possibilities?
Well, there's the theory of a Powhatan attack. The Powhatan were a powerful confederacy of native tribes in the region, and they were known to be hostile towards the English. It's possible that they attacked the Roanoke colonists, either at Roanoke or if they tried to relocate to Chesapeake Bay.
Okay, so that's one possibility. What else?
Some historians have speculated that the colonists may have tried to return to England on their own. They had a small ship, a pinnace, that they could have used. But the Atlantic is a dangerous ocean, and it's entirely possible that they were shipwrecked or lost at sea.
So another tragic possibility. What about more, shall we say, unconventional theories?
There's the conspiracy theory. The idea that the colonists were victims of a plot against Raleigh designed to sabotage his colonial ambitions.
Intriguing.
There's even a theory about a secret operation involving sassafras harvesting at a place called Beachland.
Sassafras.
Sassafras was a valuable commodity at the time. It was used to make medicine, perfume, even a type of beer. So the theory goes that the colonists were secretly moved to Beachland to harvest sassafras for Raleigh.
That's pretty out there.
It is.
And what about the Spanish? They were England's main rivals in the New World. Could they have been involved?
It's certainly possible. The Spanish were aware of English activities in the region, and they had a strong presence in the Caribbean. But there's no concrete evidence to suggest that they attacked Roanoke.
Okay, so lots of theories, lots of possibilities, but no definitive answers. And that's really what makes this story so compelling. It's a mystery that continues to capture our imagination centuries later. It makes you wonder, what do you think happened to the Roanoke colonists?
I honestly don't know. I think that's what makes the story so powerful. It's a reminder that history is not always neat and tidy. Sometimes there are no easy answers. Sometimes the mystery is more important than the solution.
Absolutely. And I think there's a beauty in that, in acknowledging the unknown, in embracing the mystery. It reminds us that there's still so much we don't know about the past, and that there's always more to discover.
And maybe, just maybe, one day we'll uncover that one piece of evidence that unlocks the mystery of the lost colony.
Until then, the speculation will continue, the theories will be debated, and the story of Roanoke will continue to fascinate and intrigue us. If the story of the lost colony has sparked your curiosity, let the All Sorts podcast on YouTube be your guide as we delve into more fascinating historical enigmas. Remember, a like on this video is like sending a signal flare, guiding others to our exploration. Share this deep dive so that this mystery reaches more curious minds. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new exploration, and know that our archives hold a wealth of past deep dives waiting to ignite your imagination. And if you'd like to connect with us beyond the world of audio, find us on X, Instagram, and Threads as the All Sorts podcast. It's your engagement that fuels our quest for knowledge and understanding. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop seeking the truth.